Hello, welcome everyone to Quakerism 101. Today's session is Getting Down to Business. And we have with us Steve Dock, who is the current clerk of meeting, as well as Mary Hampton, who has clerked meeting in the past. So they'll be leading us through this topic. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I'm off mute. Good. I am screen sharing. I have a bunch of slides, but I don't want it to be a bunch of slides and just me talking. So I hope that everyone will feel free. I'll pause at each slide, make a couple points, and give an opportunity for others to contribute or ask questions or say, what? So let's get started. First of all, I love the title. Getting Down to Business. Was that you, James? Who came up with that version of the title?
That was from the original materials that came, I think, from a meeting in Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia yearly meeting.
Well, I like it. It's snappy. Okay, so let's see if we can get going here. So these days, it's not business meeting. It's meeting for worship with attention to business. Now, I don't know when that change happened, but I have a feeling it's probably in the past 10 years, because when I moved to Austin 15 years ago, I know at sophomore meeting, we were still calling it business meeting. So at any rate, it was formerly called business meeting, and we meet in a spirit of worship to consider items that might have been presented. Generally, the items come up from committees. Very important that a business meeting is not there to make decisions. What we're trying to do is find the way forward on whatever the matter is, based on spirit. And most important, our decisions are reached in unity, in something we call the sense of the meeting. Meeting for worship with attention to business does not operate based on majority rule or consensus. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, I know Quakers, you make decisions based on consensus. That is not true. We seek unity, and we'll talk more about that. I found this, by the way, most of the things that are on these slides are an amalgam of things from the course on clerking that I took at Pendle Hill, and also parts of faith and worship of various organizations, and just odds and end things. But I thought this one it was very salient to me. Consensus is the product of an intellectual process. We all agree we're going to compromise or we'll find a middle ground. Sense of the meeting is a commitment of faith. If we have an issue that we're considering that is not clear, or maybe there are strong differences of an opinion, we are going to sit there and try to find a solution that we're led to through faith. And that's very different from consensus. The other important thing in terms of this aspect of meeting for worship with attention to business is the clerk is not a final authority. The majority is not a final authority. Even the sense of meeting is not the authority. It is the spirit that guides us that is the final authority. And so when we follow this process in attention, I'm going to call it business meeting, I'm getting tired of saying, or MWAB. When we follow this process in MWAB, we find we discern a way that has authority based on the spirit, and as much as we've involved the spirit. So that's very important to understand. Comments, questions? Contributions. All right, we'll go to the next slide.
Wait.
Oh, go ahead, jump in. I can't see you all. So if you have something, speak up, please.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not up on my Aristotle, but how does the way we make decisions in business meeting differ from Aristotle's concept of polity?
Your guess is as good as mine. I'm not an Aristotle. I don't study Aristotle, so I don't know how.
I had a comment, unless you wanted, are you going to go ahead with something else, Larry?
No.
And maybe just have Steve or Mary or someone speak to this, but I think often a person who's at their first business meeting or two is a little bit mystified because, you know, there'll be a topic that friends will be contributing on and will be worshiping on, and suddenly, it seems suddenly, the clerk will say, well, you know, are we in unity on this, or words to that effect, and we'll just, you know, it's like, okay, that's what's going on, and I think it might be worthwhile either now or later just say, well, how does the clerk gather?
Coming up in a few slides.
Okay, good. I'll shut up here. Thanks.
So it seems like too what you're saying, that this is like, you know, when you talk about ends and means or whatever, and I like to think here recently in my own independent individual life that, you know, we've become so focused on goals and being goal oriented and getting somewhere that this is much more of a process.
Yes.
And then it's not about getting somewhere or a goal.
Right.
It's a system. So
Right.
and so what I've been trying to do in my own life is concentrate on changing the systems, you know, the little minute things throughout the day, whatever, instead of having some far off goal at the end of, you know, a journey of some sort or something.
I think you're absolutely right about one particular aspect of that, Daniel, and that is that for Quakers, the process is more important than whether we achieve any results or decisions. Because the process is a process of worship and seeking.
Cool.
Now, that doesn't mean we don't have goals, but
Right.
the next slide says here, Quaker processes take time. A recently former clerk initiated me into this process by pointing out that meeting for worship with attention to business operates on God's time, not secular time, so that we can't hurry. We have to take as much time as needed. A sense of urgency doesn't help that process. So that's been a very interesting thing for me to learn. Since I, in my lifestyle, operate more with a sense of urgency than with a sense of contemplation. So, but it's important to understand that in meeting for worship with attention to business, a sense of urgency does not help the process. So we don't have a deadline for reaching a conclusion. If we have some issue that we didn't reach unity, we defer it for another meeting. We call that seasoning. Some issues get seasoned for a year or two. And that is in right order. We'll talk about that term in a little while. And if we need clarification, other than minor editing, if we say, well, you know, we're not sure about that, or people have desire for, let's explore other options, we send it back to a committee. The meeting for worship with attention to business does not do extensive editing or create new options. That's very important to understand. That the committees are the source of agenda items, and rarely, and it should be identified, clerks may bring up an item. This is a clerk's item. And in theory, then, the clerk stands aside and the associate clerk presides while the clerk is reviewing whatever it was that came up.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments to add to this? Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt there. I guess I do actually have quite a lot of questions and comments about this one. There's been a really interesting discussion recently in Friends Journal about kind of this very topic of sort of speed and slowness in Quaker process. And And I do see that there are many wonderful advantages to being able to sort of take time to really sit with something deeply. I guess the point was that this is, God's time isn't necessarily slow, that perhaps it actually is very fast. Things are urgent sometimes. And I mean, if you read the New Testament, it's not like, take your time, just take your time with it. It's all about, no, do this now. Like the New Testament is very urgent on questions. And I think probably the early friends, I'm not as familiar maybe as many of you with the writings of early friends, but my general impression of them was they were fairly urgent as well in their needs to do things. And so why we've sort of deified slowness, I think that might be actually sort of a recent mistake rather than, although there are benefits sometimes to moving slow, I don't think it's necessarily right to identify that with the sacred.
Very
I think everybody has experienced. There are times that business meeting moves with all deliberate speed.
Mhm.
This is an issue, and it needs to be solved before next Tuesday.
I'd like to just
And
throw in an
we come
example.
up with something.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, just an example real fast of both of those things. When I think the first business meeting I ever attended at Friends Meeting of Austin, there were two items that I remember, basically because of the speed that they were decided. The first item was whether or not the air conditioner should be repaired. And it was in the middle of the summer, and you might think that that was, important, but it had actually been held over, I think, for more than a year because Friends didn't have unity on this for various reasons. We don't have to go into some of them, political, ecological, whatever. And then there was another one where Henry Kissinger had come to town, and they were expecting a lot of arrests at the protests. And so was the meeting going to support these people, possibly with bail, possibly with things like that. That was decided literally in the amount of time it took to state the issue. Okay, so there's a due process, and then there's another due process that just happens. So that would be my example.
Yeah, I think my understanding and my practice, if we will, on this is that many times we reach unity quickly and the issues are clear, they're evident, the committee has done its work, it's very straightforward, we don't have to spend enormous amounts of time. But for a complex issue, an issue, almost all meetings struggled for years with the issue of offering marriage under the guidance of meeting for couples of same sex. They usually took years to reach unity for that issue. And we might have, well, I think we're very fortunate in this meeting that we don't have greatly divergent factions who have a very different outlook on religious life. If we did, if we had a group of people who, were, let's say, much more conservative than the rest of the group, we need to allow time in these processes to reach for unity, to allow the Spirit to work, to not be artificially hurried. Now, certainly if the air conditioner were broken in the middle of the summer and one or two people were strongly opposed to that, we might not allow another year to pass before reconsidering it. But the process, I think the importance of the process, allowing enough time, including time between messages, and we'll get to that in a second too, the various customs that go with business meeting are all designed to keep us in a spirit of spirit rather than business. It's funny that it's called business meeting because we don't want to operate like a business. We want to operate like a spiritual organization. But I agree with you, James. I'm going to have to get some of those issues and read about that. And we don't want to dawdle for dawdling's sake. And we certainly don't want to deify slowness, but we want to allow sufficient time for the Spirit to work amongst us. Would we agree on that?
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
One thing that that strikes me, and perhaps it may explain the change in the title of the meeting, is that achieving unity and even achieving consensus oftentimes in the world, in the business world, is I don't want to say almost unknown, but it's seldom used. Decisions are made at various levels. So
Right.
the point is, there's a delta in how you experience in the world and how we experience as a worship community. So that I'm just struck by that thought. So that's really what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Chip.
Yeah, could it be that just that, I mean, you can almost say that, I don't know, time works differently when you're speaking about it in spiritual terms, in the realm of spirit, as opposed to, I don't know, the realm of the world or worldly or whatever, worldly concerns. It just works differently. Sometimes you don't want to dawdle. Sometimes you don't want to rush. So, but it all goes back to, it's a spiritual process, rather than a worldly process.
Right.
So I was there during the air conditioner in Broglio. And what happened was there was a large contingent of friends who were born around the turn of the 20th century who felt that air conditioning violated our testimony of simplicity and would not hear to it. However, they gradually died off, and then one Sunday, the rest of them were sick or otherwise preoccupied and weren't at business meeting, and so we during that business meeting we decided to have air conditioning in the meeting. However, the ones who were sick and otherwise occupied came back to business meeting later, and when the air conditioner was broken, they once more asserted that that to have air conditioning was against Quaker simplicity, and they would not hear to having it fixed. That it was God's will that it be broken, and so that went on until once again they were not present at business meeting, and business meeting decided to fix the air conditioning. So I'm not sure that was an example of Quaker process so much as stubbornness.
So let's learn more about some of the customs that have arisen to help us conduct our, quote, business in a spirit-led manner. We're supposed to come to Quaker meeting, to meeting for worship with attention to business, as well as Quaker meeting, in a prayerful, open state of mind. Just as we don't attend meeting for worship with meeting for worship with a script in mind. When such and such, 20 minutes passes, I'm going to stand up and talk about Proposition B. That's not meeting for worship. That's politicizing or proselytizing or preaching. And we don't want to be in that spirit. We want to come to business meeting with an open mind, prepared to listen, but also keep space for the Spirit to work. We observe silence between individual contributions. That's also a way to make that space for the Spirit to work. So let's say the committee has made its report and its recommendation, and people want to comment or ask questions. One person should speak at a time. They should wait until the clerk recognizes them to speak, and there should be time between the various comments or questions. And in fact, the person asking a question should address the clerk, not the people who made the report. All of that is designed to make sure we don't get into excitement or emotions, and that we allow time and space for the Spirit to work. As this says, silence acts as a brake against someone monopolizing the meeting, someone who's a very good speaker or very emotional. We have to, as we enter the meeting with an open mind, when we hear something that's being discussed or presented, we have to strive to keep our mind open and flexible to other positions. No matter how much we think truth is on our side, we have to consider the possibility that we may be mistaken. Again, we allow time, we listen, and we want the Spirit to work amongst us.
Sorry to always ask the sort of thorny little questions here, but I'm also wondering just what like excitement and emotions. These might be, the Spirit might be moving through excitement and emotions. How can we make space for that sort of in business meeting?
Here we go, it's right here. It's appropriate to speak with conviction or passion, but not prejudice. And if you're feeling that emotion, that spirit, and want to express your opinion in that way, recognize that some people may not respond well to that. So a couple more of these customs, some I already mentioned, that you don't speak until recognized by the clerk. You indicate you wish to speak, but you wait your turn. You normally only speak once on a subject. This is a hard one for people not used to Quaker practice. You get to say your piece. Hopefully you've said everything that was important to you on that. And then you let others speak and listen very carefully. Now, you may feel really moved to speak again, but it's kind of semi-bad form to do that. So and the clerk may instead recognize other people if you've already had a chance to speak. Because again, the idea is participation and sharing and being open to everybody's ideas. We speak plainly. We don't hector or attempt to filibuster. It's just the facts, ma'am, as Dragnet used to say. And as James pointed out, certainly people get emotional and they have conviction, but we want to avoid the appearance of anger or a personal response. Leaning forward and wagging a finger in somebody's face is not good Quaker manners.
And Steve, you're probably going to talk about this, but just the essential function of the clerk in helping all these norms be enforced.
Yep.
I just wanted to, many years ago, there was a discussion of something, and I found myself disregarding Quaker practice. I was in the meeting, and someone said something, and I immediately jumped up. Didn't ask to be recognized. And the clerk, I don't know how he did it. This is Warren Wilson Reiner, because I was in his peripheral vision. He just reached out his hand, to calm me down. And I realized I needed to sit down, and then the meeting proceeded. And it was good. It was good that I didn't say what had popped into my head.
Yeah. Thanks,
One
Howard.
of the most common things is what Larry brought up before. And that's the person who doesn't come in April and shows up in May and says, but I don't agree with what y'all decided about this last month.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
The 6 of us who are here today are here because we don't agree with what you said last month.
Right. Yeah. And again, I would say that goes to the couple slides ago where the authority comes from the Spirit working through the people who were there. So if you wish to participate fully in the life of the meeting, be prepared to spend a couple hours once a month on a Sunday afternoon, because the people who participate are the ones who are going to have that opportunity to be Spirit-led and act for the whole meeting.
I see Shalisa has her hand up.
Yes, Shalisa has her hand. Shalisa, don't just speak up because it's hard to see this way.
I didn't want to interrupt just in that moment. I have a question. For say that something is going to be on the agenda for a business meeting,
Mhm.
and it's just impossible for you to make it to that meeting, but it is something that you do feel strongly about. Is it common custom to, like, if you had something to say about that, you just wanted that you're not going to be a part of the conversation later, but you might want something short that you wanted to say about it, would you email that to the clerk or send that to the clerk beforehand, and then this person would want this read? Is that something you would commonly do?
Sure. You could send your commentary to the clerk and the clerk can read it for you, or you could send it to the clerk of the committee that is presenting the report.
Steve, one thing that is really interesting, the common customs of meeting for worship with attention to business. They really demonstrate the emphasis on equality of each person.
Exactly.
And it made me think when I was the last paying job that I had when I was consulting in New Jersey, I had a bunch of musician friends who also happened to be lawyers, and one of them had argued several cases before the Supreme Court, and I think we had gotten into some discussion somehow about something, but he said that the requirement on the Supreme Court, when you're speaking of your I'll say opposing attorney, the attorney presenting the opposite side, the only way you're allowed to reference that individual other than by name is to call him or her my friend. So it just strikes me reading through these that it's a matter of maintaining equality between people.
I think that's an excellent point, and should add that to this presentation, that at any of our operations, and certainly during meeting for worship with attention to business, everyone is equal. And everyone's contribution and contribution to the corporate spirit are equally valued and encouraged. And I think the last item on this slide is that meetings should never become a debating club. You may feel strongly, and then there are ways to deal with that. I think we'll get to those. If not, we'll bring them up. But you have to trust, once you've said your piece, you have to trust that if other valid points occur, you have to hope that the spirit will work and Jim Kuhn will raise those points. Or someone else who's very open to the spirit. Okay, what comes up next here? Why is it called meeting for worship with attention to business? Why isn't it just meeting with attention to business? Because the entire process, from the initial silence to a final handshake, virtual or not, is regarded as worship. Quaker business covers all the usual items: our budget, membership, do we repair the air conditioner, et cetera, et cetera. But we value the whole process at least as much as the outcome. The process of sharing in the spirit and coming to joint unity is at least as important as what we decide, the outcomes themselves. It's a different kind of worship. It's a worship where we're putting our spirit to use in supporting the community as a whole, the faith community as a whole. And so it is a process of worship. And we use the term the right conduct of Quaker business and business meetings. And that refers to all what we've just talked about here. Operating in the spirit, following the customs and practices in terms of who speaks, allowing time, addressing the clerk, avoiding person-to-person kind of debates. All of that is part of right conduct. And if we're operating in right conduct, we have much better chance of reaching spiritual unity and benefiting from these processes. comments or questions on this? Okay. Oops. Okay. The role of the clerk. So the clerk is just another person. The clerk is not elevated in any way, shape, or form. The clerk is a servant of the meeting. It's someone for a member of the meeting, typically, well, at least in our meeting, it's somebody who is a formal member and chosen for the task or appointed to the task, but no other special status. And in fact, during the meeting, other than moving along the agenda and recognizing when it's time to seek unity, the clerk should not contribute. The clerk should not speak his or her opinions on matters. And if they feel compelled to do so, the clerk will stand aside and make sure that they're presenting his or her opinion independent of their role as servant of the meeting and clerk. So that's very important to understand. The clerk's a glorified agenda facilitator. So one of the things the clerk does is prepare an agenda. And if the agenda is very lengthy, they may include some summary information. We also have an assistant clerk, and at our meeting, we call it the associate clerk, and the associate clerk sits along with the presiding clerk and helps with maybe reading letters, keeping an eye on who's got their hand raised, sensing when something is getting, a little moved away from the center of the spirit and nudging the clerk or suggesting that perhaps we might want to let Jim Kuhn speak another time here. I'm going to continue to use Jim as my example. During discussion, one of the important things the clerk does is in between pauses. The clerk, first of all, makes sure there's pauses. So we've had an item, we've discussed it for a while. The clerk should sit in silence and maybe even say, how about, I suggest we sit in silent prayer for a minute before we continue. Clerk provides pauses in between items, during items, if it seems like we're struggling with them, and possibly, as Howard said, puts a hand out and encourages a friend to chill out. But at some point, the clerk may say, I think we're moving towards agreement that Jim will be responsible for fixing the air conditioner. Is that your sense? And look around and see what everybody is doing. Hopefully everybody's nodding their head by then. But if Howard is shaking his head, then the clerk will ask and say, Howard, do you want to contribute at this point? And so the clerk is got to be tuned in and watch what's going on among participants and make a brief summary of where he or she thinks the process is on a particular item. And then after that, if everybody's shaking their head or fallen asleep, the clerk can ask the recording clerk, who will come up next, to prepare a minute. Let's see here, it says, okay, so the final bullet we've already talked about, a shaper of discussion by making sure that people have an opportunity to speak who don't normally speak, or you can see someone kind of wiggling in their seat, but they haven't expressed that desire. The clerk can say, Hannah, we'd like to hear from you, etc. Hi. And any comments on this? I think we have another slide. Yeah, we have another slide with some more, but go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the role of the assistant clerk, or in our case, the associate clerk, is described here. In other contexts, that's called the companion in ministry. How does a companion in ministry differ from an assistant clerk?
Well, but you're coming up with good ones. I don't know that term, companion in ministry, but in addition to what the associate clerk does during meeting for worship with attention to business, the associate clerk is in a mentorship, if you will, in preparation for becoming the presiding clerk. and participates in the clerk's meetings when we review the agenda, may provide the spiritual lead-in to the meeting, and in essence just works right alongside the recording clerk and the presiding clerk during the 2-year term. So I don't know what the companion, but we don't, if you're asking, well, I don't know what you're asking. Help me, what does a companion, a spiritual, that term you use, do?
Well, it's very much like the assistant clerk. They're supposed to sense undercurrents going on in the meeting,
Okay.
and alert the the person presiding, sometimes called a clerk and sometimes called a convener, but they're to alert that person of these things. They're to give the clerk or the convener feedback on how the meeting went.
Okay.
And also they're to hold the meeting in the light. They spend a lot of time holding the meeting in the light, and that's part of their sensing the undercurrents, of course. They have other duties, but I know as much about companions in ministry as I do about Aristotle. So.
Well, you knew more than I did on both. Glenna, I think she wanted to contribute something. You're on mute. You're still on mute. Glenna, you're on mute.
Right, I'm okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. The companion in ministry, I've only seen a person in that role when there's a traveling minister to give a presentation. Usually it's the traveling minister has been invited because the group, the Quaker meeting wants to hear what the traveling minister has to say. They have some expertise in the topic. And so, but I've, only been in Austin, the Austin meeting, and I don't have the worldwide or nationwide view of the differences in Quakerism. But I haven't ever seen that referred to as people sitting at the table. I always called it meeting for worship because that's what it was called when I started. But anyway, that's another topic that I don't want to get into. I'm done.
What is a traveling minister?
Ah.
Do you want me to go on with that?
Please, Glenna.
Okay. A traveling minister is somebody that has a leading to do something and meets with a group of people, probably through counsel.
Care and counsel, yeah.
Care and counsel. I have a minute for that, and Mary also does. I had a leading to take a man on death row at his request to be his spiritual advisor. Initially, he wanted a spiritual advisor who believed that he should live, not that he should die. And so I met with the Care and Counsel Committee about 3 times, and then they recommended to the meeting that I be approved for that. And I was approved specifically to be a spiritual advisor for Charles Flores, and that's in the minute. So it's not the usual way that there's a traveling minute. I think it's usually, and that's a traveling minute, but it's usually when you're traveling within friends, I think. But then, when Woolman went to the Native Americans, he probably had some sort of endorsement of support. Anyway, that's plenty, I think, unless there's questions. But I think it's sort of off topic.
No, it's Quaker practice, and I think that the general summary could be that a member or a friend feels a strong spiritual calling to do something outside of the meeting that he or she is a member of.
Mhm.
Maybe
Right.
travel among the quarter or the yearly meeting or across the whole country and spread this strong spiritual message, to preach in essence, or to share this spiritual need, this calling that this person feels. And following good friends practice, one of the things we do is we, I'll call it season, but we share these strong leadings with the community, either maybe with the worship and ministry committee or care and council, or ask for a special clearness committee to share our feelings and then this expression that this call we've had from the Spirit, and validate that and season it through that group. And then if we still have it and the group agrees, you ask your monthly meeting for a traveling minute, which you then present when you go around to these other places, that you're approved and authorized to do this in the name of your meeting and in the name of the Spirit. So it's a very interesting and another whole topic we could have. James, Quakerism 101, traveling ministers.
Sure, sounds good. Maybe section 7 next time. Yeah.
I have a
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Chip.
I was just going to say, I have a question about that, because I you know, traveling this last week, I contacted the Palm Beach Friends meeting where I had been before, and I don't know them well, but they recognized me and they said welcome, and I asked if they had face-to-face, and they were doing the small face-to-face, and that's how I chose to worship with them. But even in our faith and practice, it talks about traveling to and meeting with another meeting, and I'm wondering if in that case, is it appropriate to have the meeting contact the meeting? That's kind of how I was reading.
Not typically just for visiting. I mean, if you're going to sojourn, let's say you're going to spend a year someplace, or a semester, or a sabbatical, you might want your meeting to let them know. But generally, if you're visiting Palm Beach and you're going to be there for a week or two, you just attend that meeting. And at the end, rise and introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Chip. I'm visiting from Friends Meeting of Austin. We bring you greetings. And they say, welcome. Come up afterwards and offer you the best cookies.
That's right. Thanks. That helps.
I just had a little note.
Go ahead.
Okay, just backing up a couple bullet points, just to kind of maybe illustrate the fact that there can be some differences in practice between meetings. South Central yearly meeting has the same structure, has the clerk and I think they call it an associate clerk at South Central yearly meeting. But discerning who the associate clerk is just a little different. So the clerk's term is for 2 years. The first year, the associate clerk is the person who was clerk before them.
Oh,
So just kind of be there for moral support. The second year, it's the person who will be clerk after them.
okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, just an interesting side note.
Yeah. I see Glenn.
Also,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
also many big business meetings are the big meetings I've attended for business, like executive committee of Friends General Conference. And I think sometimes a yearly meeting will ask some people to more or less hold their own participation and just sit there and hold the meeting in the light.
Right.
And they have a term for what they call those people. They're not companions, but I couldn't tell you what the term is. But they'll ask, we need 3 people to do this, or we need two people to do this before the meeting starts.
Great. Glenn has been trying to get in here. Glenna, go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
There's 2 kinds of letters, and when I was clerk, it was a big surprise to me because we don't talk about it. But there's a letter, well, there's a traveling minute that we've been talking about. But when a friend is going to another place and it's maybe a personal interest, it's not necessarily an interest for the meeting for business, they can ask for a letter of endorsement, or it's a letter of introduction, I think is what it is. And especially if it's under the care of the meeting. So when a person comes with that and they do whatever they were to do, the clerk is supposed to sign and sort of do a short paragraph about how it went. And then and the person with that letter of introduction takes that back to the meeting or the quarter or yearly, whatever, and it's in their files for that. And that should be part of our training when we have sort of a packet for the clerk. And sometimes it's really hard to come up with the right language in 5 minutes before they're leaving for their flight.
Interesting. See, that's a whole topic, James. And the whole topic of ministry among friends. When I'm away for the summer on Swans Island, we have a little worship group, usually no more than 3 or 4 people. But we have had visits at least twice from an appointed Quaker minister who was well into his 90s. And of course, I can't think of his name right now, but it's fascinating when he joins us. His son is not a Baptist, he's probably a Methodist minister, but he's an official, I think he came from Putney Meeting originally, but Quakers can appoint ministers. That's another whole topic. I wouldn't know how. All right, let's finish with the clerk already. So, and Howard addressed this. When the clerk feels that the sense in the meeting has reached unity. Now, how does the clerk know that? Clerk has to be paying attention, and the associate clerk has to help there too. Is everybody, is the conversation getting quiet? The comments have been addressed in one way or the other. People are sitting with their, they're not sitting like this. People look like they're reaching comfort and accommodation. And then the clerk will propose something. The clerk will say, have we reached unity on the budget draft that's been presented to us? And look around at everybody. And then the next step is the clerk will ask the recording clerk, can you please prepare a minute? And most of the time the recording clerk's already got the minute ready to read, or is just tweaking it a little bit. And here's where the recording clerk becomes very important, because the recording clerk puts in short and accurate words, what we call a minute, which is the record of the sense of unity, the conclusion that we have reached. And it may be just echoing back. And it starts off with a date and a number. So if it were May 2nd, 2021, it'd be 05.22.21.1. That would be the first minute that's been proposed for that particular meeting for worship with attention to business. And it might be that Friends Meeting of Austin approves Daniel for traveling ministry in New England yearly meeting, or whatever it was. And the clerk, the recording clerk, will then read that, and we'll have another period of silence where we're looking around and making sure that everybody agrees with that. And there are occasions when someone will ask to speak and say, I think we meant to use this word instead of that word, or make a suggestion to modify that draft read by the recording clerk. And we'll give time for comment and suggestion, and wait till everybody's calm and peaceful again, and recording clerk will read the revised minute. And hopefully we don't go through that process 5 or 6 or 7 times, or the clerk should then say, I think this needs further seasoning, and we'll send it back to committee to do that rewrite and get back to us at next meeting for worship or attention to business. But if it's a 1 or 2 little word tweak. We've also, when it is to address James' good comment from earlier, if it's something with a time, like we wanted to get we wanted to go on record against Proposition B, and we wanted to get that done, the clerk may say, if a subgroup of you want to go off and draft something and bring it back later in this meeting, which was what we did a couple times, that's another way of handling that, but we're not going to, as a group, sit there and edit and write. That's not the role of meeting for worship or attention to business. Separate committee or group of that committee does the drafting and revising. And finally, when the minute has been read and there's no further suggestions, then the clerk says, okay, let's move on to the next item. And that's how we go through the process of, and judging the sense of meeting. Again, we're very lucky at this meeting in that there's not, and I did experience this at Swarthmore Friends meeting, there were factions. There were some people who, you know, stood for a certain approach to things, and there were others who were generational, primarily of a different generation, and had a different sense of where we should be leading. And it made it very hard sometimes to come to routine decisions. So fortunately, I haven't experienced that in my 6 years here. Howard.
Yeah, I need to jump off in a minute, but I just wanted to underline the role of the clerk as the servant of the meeting, and simply the reflector of the sense of the meeting. Again, quite a few years ago, I sort of was caught, you know how you're sometimes stuck up against a wall and two people are talking to each other and you can't get out. So someone who hadn't been at the last meeting for worship with attention to business confronted the clerk and said, how could you let that decision come out of meeting?
Mm.
And the clerk very correctly responded, I don't run this meeting. I reflect the sense of the meeting. And I am the servant of the meeting. I am not the leader of this community, and I do not run the business meeting. The Spirit runs it.
Very good. Thanks, Howard.
Got to jump off. See you all later.
Okay, see ya. Okay, before we continue with the recording, clerk, I don't think I have a slide on this, but what happens if we don't reach unity? What if all but one person agree? And that one person has very strong feelings. Well, that person has a choice. They can either express their feelings and say, however, I will stand aside, which means that even though they don't agree, they recognize that the sense of unity of the meeting other than themselves has meshed and gelled, and they will not prevent the minute from going forward, or whatever it is from going forward. So that's standing aside. And then I forget, what's the term, Glenda, for when somebody says I stand, is it I stand in opposition and then we don't move forward?
We probably would put it to the next business meeting.
Right, right. But I mean, we won't proceed. We won't, if one person, if somebody says, no, I am opposed, or I cannot agree, then that person is still.
I was told of a situation about approving marriage for same-gender couples, that one meeting had been working on this for 2 years. And
2 years, right, yeah.
They had all this material that they were supposed to read, and then it finally came up for approval, and someone who was a longtime member but hadn't attended any of these things was opposed to it. And the clerk said, I'm sorry, you do not have enough weight on this subject.
Ooh.
And he and understood that that person that got that message got it and felt respected. He recognized that it was true.
Wow. I've never heard of that. That's interesting. Larry, do you want to add something? Hannah, go ahead. Hannah and then Larry.
Were you saying that was in this meeting?
No, that was in a
No.
different meeting. So that's an interesting thing I had never heard of before. Larry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, a similar event happened in our meeting when we were discussing marriage for gay people. And one woman kept saying, "Oh, well, I don't think Ethel Barrow would approve of this." Ethel Barrow was a weighty Quaker in the meeting who was one of the founders of the meeting. And she was out sick that business meeting. And the clerk said, "Yes, but what do you say?" You know, very much like George Fox. And the woman just kept saying, "Well, I don't think Ethel would approve of this." And so finally, the clerk asked, and the clerk was our friend Paul in Columbia, by the way. He asked, well, will you stand aside? And she once more, she just said, "I just don't think Ethel would agree with this." And so the clerk decided that the sense of the meeting was that we would approve marriage for gay people.
Yeah, so those are the difficult situations. So let's all be in harmony, please. Let's all start in the key of C. All right, let's, where were we here? Okay, so another interesting, I'll call it tradition, that's very important to Quakers is we keep records. Historians love Quakers because they can go back 300 years into a Quaker meeting and find their records of who's applied for membership and what actions were taken and who's been married and who's been drummed out and, you know, whatever. All the minutia, much of the minutia is recorded and kept in a way that is accessible for very long periods of time. And this begins with the recording clerk. So the recording clerk, as we know, drafts the minute that is going to be the official record of action and prepares a set of minutes after every meeting for worship with attention to business. And we publish that in friendly notes here at this meeting, along with a bunch of other additional stuff. We have, this second bullet says we have great importance on keeping those records. And here in FMA, if you go to austinquakers.org and go under community documents, you can search and find copies of friendly notes dating back to July 1999. And I don't know where the hard copies, the other thing we do, and many meetings do this, is we send copies of all of our minutes and other documents, letters that we send to politicians or whoever, to Swarthmore College, where there is Friends Historical Society. What's it called, Mary, in Swarthmore?
Swarthmore Historical Library, is that what you're referring to?
Right, yeah.
Also, we do have bound copies of our minutes before 99 in our library.
Exactly, yeah. So that's important because there are occasions when you want to go back and understand and see how the meeting came to the spot it's in, or decision processes that were used and discussions that were held. If you go back and look at even recent friendly notes, in addition to the minutes that are formally approved through the sense of the meeting, the recording clerk usually says discussion about such and such, or a friend mentions such and such. So there'll be a little more color included in the full record of minutes beyond just the formal action that was approved and agreed upon. So that's the recording clerk plays a very important role in meeting with this tradition and sense of history that we all have as Quakers. Any comments and suggestions on that one?
Not on that one specifically, Steve, but I just wanted to be mindful. It's about 2 o'clock now, and we typically take a little break at some point. I'm not sure whether good sort of...
Sure, absolutely. I think there's only a handful of slides, but yeah, let's take a little break, sure. Absolutely. Come back in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, good idea. Thanks, James. Not yet, but soon. So, next topic is committees. As already mentioned, meeting for worship with attention to business doesn't doesn't write up the items, doesn't create the things we're going to be considering. It comes out of our committee process. And so it's important to understand that membership and as a matter of fact, tendership in the Religious Society and Friends involves commitment, and membership in a committee and participation in a committee is a very important part of that. The committees also follow much the same process. The clerk is a servant of the committee if you're the clerk of care and counsel or community life or whatever, peace and social concerns. And you perform much the same kind of a role. You create an agenda, you try to encourage people to participate. You have a lot more time for deliberation, if you will, and creating and modifying the language. But the processes should work pretty much the same, and the committees also seek to get unity before they move forward and present something to Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business. One of the very important committees that I wanted to mention is Nominating Committee. The Nominating Committee is composed of members and attenders who are willing to do the thankless job of matching people's talents with the committees that we have. And it relates to people who can recognize that maybe Shalisa has a particular skill in, I don't know, typography, and is a good writer. And we know that the Friendly Communications Committee certainly could use somebody to help them with friendly notes and the weekly bulletin. And so somebody on the Nominating Committee might approach her and say, have you thought about participating in this kind of an activity with us? We also, Nominating Committee usually has someone who stands up at the end of meeting and makes that pitch that if you have talents, read through the committee descriptions, which are on the website, and let us know. We'll be happy to have you join. And that's also probably the best way to actually get to know and meet people in meeting, other than going out to lunch or dinner, is to work with people in committees. That's how you get to really build friendships and get involvement and engagement with the committee as a community. What else here? Committees are supposed to keep minutes and report to the monthly meeting regularly. Committees don't act on their own pretty much, other than, I guess, if House and Grounds needs to immediately fix a pipe, they don't wait for the next monthly meeting. But by and large, committees make reports and recommendations up to Meeting for Worship with Attention to Meeting so that those actions are approved. And that's the kind of thing that Peace and Social Concerns has done quite a bit of recently in terms of drafting a minute or taking a minute that might have been prepared by New England Yearly Meeting or Friends General Conference and presenting that to Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business. Well, first of all, discussing it at their meeting at Peace and Social Concerns, as an example, discussing it at their meeting, maybe changing the language a little bit to emphasize something, and then present that at the next Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business to be formally a position that the meeting as a whole has taken. Committees generally cannot represent themselves as speaking for the meeting as a whole. They're certainly more than welcome to meet with other organizations, whether it's, let's say, during the Martin Luther King parade or whatever, but they don't commit or speak for the meeting as a whole without going through Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business. I think that's everything on this slide. Anybody have any questions or more to add about how committees, the importance of committees and sort of how they operate? No, good. We have two committees. You hear them announced over and over again at every meeting, and they are Worship and Ministry and Care and Counsel. And many other denominations have full-time clergy. Many denominations, including evangelical Quakers or Friends United meetings, have paid ministers and ministers' spouses and maybe even an associate pastor to perform the functions that these two committees do. but unprogrammed friends generally do not have paid staff doing any kind of pastoral care. We do it through committees and volunteers. Very brave of us. So the idea of worship and ministry is to deepen the spiritual lives of the individuals in the meeting, to encourage them to ministry and service, and basically that's it. Their focus is on the spiritual life of the community. The word community should be here, to help develop and strengthen the spiritual life of the individuals and the community as a whole. So they engage with things like how should we close meeting, and in what order should we make the announcements, and should we have more forums about X, Y, or Z, and other kinds of issues. If there were, let's say there was someone in the meeting who was struggling with a spiritual issue, they might want to consult with worship and ministry and have a committee of worship and ministry help them work through that struggle that they're having. And the Care and Counsel Committee is responsible for the personal activities rather than the spiritual activities. So the care of individuals who may be ill, who may be suffering from financial stress, loss of job, etc. Also appointing what we call support committees. There might be someone who has a long-term need of whatever the kind is, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, marriage, whatever. And they ask for a support committee, and we might pick 2 or 3 people, some members of the Care and Counsel Committee and some others, to work on, let's say, a weekly basis, to be available to that person, to let them share their emotional needs and help support them spiritually, emotionally, and in whatever way necessary. We might have a care committee for someone who has a long-term illness and needs help in a variety of ways. So a care committee and a support committee are ways we deal with the individual needs of people. We also have special kinds of committees that Care and Counsel forms to support people who are seeking membership. We call these clearness committees, seeking membership, clearness for marriage. What else do we have? Oh, clearness if you're, again, struggling with an issue of some kind. You have a problem that you haven't been able to solve yourself. And whether that's spiritual or not, you may ask for a clearness committee to help you identify that and help work towards that resolution. Care and Counsel also gets to administer a fund, the benevolence fund, which is money that people have contributed, and that's what we use to help support people in financial difficulty to the extent that we can. This set of functions used to be performed by one committee called the Oversight Committee in the good old days. But that phrase has certainly fallen out of use. And if you ever watch any movies, what's the one, Friendly Persuasion? Is that the one, Friendly Persuasion, that takes place in and around the Civil War on a farm, Quaker farm. And the Oversight Committee comes to visit, and it's a time of terror, because the Oversight Committee can throw you out of meeting, more or less disown you. So that's not a function we perform anymore, at least I don't think so. Questions about this role of committees and how we operate, or comments? Larry, you're on mute.
Yes, if I have a concern that I would like clearness on, how would I know whether to approach the Worship and Ministry Committee or the Care and Counsel Committee?
Try either. We'll figure it out.
So they'll let me know.
Mm-hmm. Mary.
I think in our meeting, we mostly clearness committees of clarity have been formed by Care and Counsel, regardless of how spiritual the issue was.
Okay, thank you. So, but
on the other hand, if you've got a specific question about worship, that's definitely worship and ministry.
And if it were a spiritual struggle you're having, I assure you, Care and Counsel would draft somebody from worship and ministry to be on that clearness committee. One thing I want to mention about care and counsel in particular, while it mentions here importance of keeping minutes and recording them, and everything care and counsel does is confidential. So while care and counsel keeps minutes, they're only shared among care and counsel. So while worship and ministry would seek to have members who have a strong commitment to the spiritual life and probably a pretty deep sense of reading and history and being able, a sense of weight in spiritual matters, care and counsel wants people who are able to accept the responsibilities with absolute confidentiality and work in empathy and in a Quaker way, but with absolute confidentiality. So here's a list of the committees, straight from our website. We have a goodly number here at FMA, I must say. Adult Religious Education handles forums and Quakerism 101. Care and Counsel, we've already discussed. Columbia Ministry is a special one, which I guess derives from the fact that Paul and his wife were members of Meeting and then moved back to Columbia and engage in this wonderful combination of spirit and practical help through Noah's Ark. And you want to read about that. Again, every one of these links brings you to a website with a description and usually attached documents and maybe a schedule of when the next meeting is. Things like that are on the web pages. Community life deals with activities within the meeting. If when we're meeting in person, it would be the snacks afterwards, the monthly eating meeting, holiday celebrations, things like that are what community life is well known for. Community relations deals with the relationship between Friends Meeting of Austin and the rest of the City of Austin and various organizations, including people who want to use the meeting house for other purposes who are not part of our meeting. Finance administration deals with finance and administration, our operating budget, our how we pay for insurance, this and that and the other. So they deal with the nitty-gritty. First Day School handles our Sunday school, as it would be known in other organizations. And actually, some Quaker meetings have outside professional teachers who teach in their First Day School. Friends Meeting of Austin has all the instruction and all the care done by members. Friendly Communications handles our communications, including announcements that go out, the weekly bulletin, and friendly notes. Possibly could even be writing press releases and things, although recently that's pretty much being done by Peace and Social Concerns with regard to the various ongoing activities. House and Grounds has the weighty responsibility to keep our house and grounds maintained and functional. They do a lot of that with volunteer work. The Library Committee takes care of our library, which is quite extensive. That is open if you wanted to make arrangements and come to the meeting house and gather some materials from the library. And then of course on Sunday mornings now, we've been open for the past couple of weeks. So there's a lot of useful things in the library. Nominating, we mentioned before, has a very important role of helping match the talents of members and attenders to the committee functions. Peace and Social Concerns is, we could call that our social conscience. Members of that committee are engaged with things that relate back to our testimonies, like the peace testimony and equality and so on and so forth. And Jim has been running open meetings almost every Friday evening. Anybody's welcome to attend and participate in the many things that are going on around us that need some Quaker attention and perspective. Stewardship is the other piece of finance. Stewardship is concerned more with the longer term financial stability of the meeting, managing our investments and planning for long-term future. And we've already talked about worship and ministry. Any questions about the committees that we currently have or any comments? Who's volunteering?
Yeah, you mentioned peace and social concern.
Yes, social concerns, yes.
Jim having something on Friday evening. What?
Yeah.
You go more in detail about that and what time that is?
Sure, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, so Friday evenings from 6 to 7, we meet on a recurring Zoom link that you can find on the website. I'll drop it into the chat. But most of our agenda items over the past year have related to discerning unity around where COVID relief funding should be distributed. But other topics come up as well. And typically we have a monthly meeting, but since about May of last year or April, it's been weekly, and it's open. So we'd love to have you join us, Daniel.
Cool.
I'll provide the details.
Thanks.
All right, let's talk about that. I'm sorry.
I think Larry has something to say.
Larry, thank you, Shalisha.
I was wondering if our insurance policy is still being administered by community relations.
I have no idea. I would think our insurance policy is administered by finance administration.
That does seem to be where it would go, but when I was on community relations, we were doing the insurance policy.
Oh.
Maybe that's a topic for business meeting.
I have a question about the nominating committee.
Sure, go ahead, Shalisha.
So if in the same way that if you give, you're wanting to donate, but there's not a specific place or a specific reason why you're donating, you just want it to go to the area that has the most need, would it be common to reach out to the nominating committee and say, hi, these are my skills, this is what I'm good at.
Absolutely.
Where do you think I could be best use? Because while it might be great, for example, at typography, there might also already be someone who's good at that in that position. Mm-hmm. And so, I might have other skills. So, okay.
Absolutely. Part of the way typically nominating works is and I'm pretty sure it's on their website, they have a form where you can indicate your interests and talents, and then they can try to match you up to a place that has those needs. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So in addition to committees, wake up, we have some groups, and many of our groups help put our spiritual life into action. Until COVID times, our Adult Young Friends group was doing a wonderful job by getting together monthly and going out to lunch, of developing relationships and sharing the journey in Friends Meeting of Austin, and hopefully you'll be able to resume that sometime soon. We have an anti-racism awareness group, which has been actually going on for about 5 years and meets once a month to help our growth in doing the work of anti-racism. There's the Circle of Light, which is our prayer group, and it holds various people and causes. And as you can hear at the end of Meeting for Worship these days, there are many people who have requests for prayer, and Larry and Heather are two of the members who weekly follow up on those requests. We have a group who is really a death penalty issues committee, and they do a lot of things, but especially they visit people on death row. That has also been shut down until recently due to COVID, but it's recently resumed. And some of the members of that group have long-term relationships with people on death row and find it very rewarding, and I would find it very challenging. But it's an amazing committee. And Liz Yates mentioned, I forget where she mentioned it recently, but she has an article in this month's Friends Journal that talks about hope and how little seeds can grow into positive action. And in that article, she recounts something that the death penalty, or the death, yeah, the group that addresses the death penalty in the meeting years ago brought the issue of juveniles being subject to the death penalty to attention and put a lot of work into it. And in fact, we've seen the results where that is not, the death penalty is no longer applied to people who are juveniles. We have a group of Earth Care Witness, which works on environmental issues. The web project group is trying to keep the website alive and relevant. And then, of course, under adult religious education, there's a group that works on the Quakerism 101 course. And groups could be formed, you know, basically any couple of people get together, have an interest, want to start doing it under, you know, members and attenders want to do it and have it recognized. Just basically ask, I'd like to have a group about such and such. Now, if it were a group.
Resources Committee, Steve.
Pardon?
What is the Resources Committee?
Oh, that's not even on. Is it on here? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah.
So the Resources Committee was an ad hoc committee. I guess it's still in existence. We need to retire it soon, I think. The Resources Committee was an ad hoc committee that was formed to look at the resources that the meeting as a whole has and how they're being used. And there's, if you go to the page, you'll find reports that were produced out of the Resources Committee. The two main things that were produced were a detailed description of our physical, people, and financial resources and how they're currently being used. I guess it's 2 years old now. And then another report was recommendations on specific things related to some of the committees.
Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know why I skipped right over that, Mary. A blind eye, huh? So if folks, you know, I would say if somebody wanted to form a blacksmithing group, I'm not sure that fits, but who knows? If we had a bunch of people who are interested in blacksmithing, why not? But in general, it should be related to the Quaker testimonies, something that's related to testimonies or developing our community life. All right, we're almost done. How are Quakers organized? Now, for those of you who are relatively new to us, and have been participating at Friends Meeting of Austin, you are participating in a monthly meeting. And a monthly meeting is the basic unit of Quakerism. Generally, we meet weekly for worship. We also, in theory, have a midweek worship. I don't know if anybody's been attending that for months during COVID, but we might have multiple worships, but at least once a week, almost always on first day, on Sunday, and then monthly for business. That's why it's a monthly meeting. We also have quarterly meetings, so groups of several, usually geographically adjacent meetings may get together and decide that they want to operate in addition to, as a monthly meeting, as a quarterly meeting, where, for instance, Austin and San Antonio and Houston and Dallas might want to get together 4 times a year, possibly, and meet in the same way, worship, have a business meeting, and talk about things that we might want to do together that arose from meetings that were formed at a quarterly level. So it broadens the range of participation, gives you the opportunity to meet people beyond your local meeting. Provides a way for Quakers to accomplish things that are regional rather than extremely local. And then the next level up is yearly meeting. And a yearly meeting is typically a group of multiple quarterly meetings. And they usually have a formal get-together of the whole, as many people as want to show up, once a year. And during that get-together, which can be a lot of partying, could be swimming, could be horseback riding, could be all kinds of activities, could be a week or a weekend. During the yearly meeting, you also have a yearly business meeting where the various monthly meetings and possibly quarterly meetings provide reports and suggestions and minutes to be reviewed, etc. Our meeting is called South Central Yearly Meeting. Other examples are Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, New England Yearly Meeting, and on and on and on. There are lots of yearly meetings in the US and, of course, around the world. Very important to note, this is not a hierarchy. Yearly meeting doesn't tell monthly meeting what to do. Quarterly meeting doesn't tell yearly meeting what to do, etc. These are all independent organizations. Of course, they share information. Yearly meeting may develop a minute that they send down to, or share rather, with the monthly meetings and ask us to bring it up at our business meeting, but this is not a hierarchical structure. It's a cooperative structure of individual Quakers participating at multiple levels. Any questions about that? Our yearly meeting in a normal year takes place on Easter weekend at, what's it called? What's the ranch location called? Mary?
Green Family Camp,
Green Family Camp.
which is just south of Temple, all 535.
Right, so it's about an hour drive north, and it's got cabins and outdoor facilities, and it's a wonderful way to spend 2.5 to 3 days with your fellow Quakers and from all around Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Get to meet people from those areas and get to know them and worship together and have fun. And the last slide, I think, yes, we made it. The last slide is just a list of national organizations of all kinds. Quakers organize in many, many ways, and they're non-exclusive. You could be members of every one of those organizations, or just one, or none. But the most widely known one around the world is the American Friends Service Committee, which works for peace and actually has won a Nobel Prize for work they've done.
At least two of them are international.
That's right.
That being Friends World Committee for Consultation and Quakers United Publications.
Thank you, Mary. We should fix that.
Wow, instant feedback.
Well, I'm going to save this, and I'll post this up to the website as a PDF sometime later today. Under ARE, or yeah, I'll put it on the ARE committee. So there's lots of things we're involved in, lots of ways that you might want to participate. I'm sure every single one of these has a website. How come it's not aligned? Anyhow, every one of them has a website where you can go and get more information. Many people in our meeting are very active in multiple ones of these. You might frequently hear from Larry about the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which works with both Texas and the federal government to try to move forward items and perspectives that tie into Quaker testimonies. So lots of opportunity to engage with Quakers and Quaker principles in multiple specific ways.
Steve, just
Any other important ones that we should add to this list?
This is very trivial, but because I know it seems like it matters to you, they're not aligned because there's spaces versus tabs. So you click in front of it and hit tab. For each one, it should align them.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right. You're right. I usually hit tab. If I do it this way, then it'll do it, right? Yep. Okay, I'll fix that.
We belong to the anti-torture group. I don't remember the name of it.
It's NRCAT, right?
Thank you.
National Religious Coalition Against Torture.
Right.
And Walter Long is on their board.
NAC?
AT.
I guess I don't know, is that a specifically Quaker organization, or is that a sort of ecumenical organization?
It's ecumenical.
That's why it's not on here.
Oh.
But it's important.
Okay.
That would be in our CAT, not NACAT.
Thank you.
Can you tell me more about the, I guess I could just look it up, the Friends Quaker Universalist Fellowship?
Okay, so you may or may not be aware that there are many flavors of Quakerism.
Right.
We have, what you're participating in is what we call unprogrammed Quakers. So we we have no paid clergy. We are more of a universalist tradition in terms of being accepting of multiple religious documents and traditions as being inspirational to our faith. There are a lot of, actually the vast majority of Quakers around the world are very different than we are nowadays, especially in Africa, where most Quakers are these days around the world. They have ministers and preach the gospel and do have some silent worship, but they're very different. And what is their the group in the U.S.? Quakers United, isn't that Quakers United?
Friends United Meeting.
Sorry, Friends United, yes.
FUM.
Yeah, FUM, there it is. Friends United meeting is something that they participate in. It's like our Friends General Conference. I don't know quite what Quaker Universal Fellowship is. You'll have to look it up and let us know, Daniel.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because I come from a UU background and church and then I've been frequenting here more and wanting to get more involved and probably become a member of the Friends meeting in Austin. And so I was just curious because
yeah, it sounds like it could be related, but I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here being picky. Does anybody have anything else that they think would be valuable to share while we're gathered?
I'm just wondering, maybe Steve, if you want to switch us back into our
yes.
full...
Excellent, thank you. There we go.
Yeah, I guess something that I'm just curious of people's views out. Hopefully I won't horrify people too much, seeing as I'm associate clerk right now in expressing this, but for me, I feel like sometimes when I've been at meeting for business, the ones that have felt sort of most spirit-filled sometimes deviated a little bit from those practices and processes, that they had a little bit of openness and sort of flexibility to them. Whereas sometimes the meetings where we do adhere very, very closely to the process can feel really stilted, and it feels like spirit sometimes gets lost. So I feel like sometimes maybe overemphasis on process puts the cart before the horse a little bit in terms of making our meeting spirit-led.
Is there a question there?
Oh, sorry, that wasn't a question. That was more of a statement of opinion, which may just mortify everyone. Sorry.
Well, James, I would like to say that I've long thought God is a trickster.
I'm looking forward to your clerkship in the near future.
Great. Chaos, anarchy will reign. Oh dear, no, don't worry. I'll try to. I'll do my best.
Sure you will. Everyone brings their own personality and style, I'm sure. As much as we're may have participated in a formal training with Arthur Larrabee or not, as much as we've been clerks of committees or however many years of experience, we're informed and led by the traditions, but we're still people and our clerks as led by our personality and those traditions.
How much has COVID put a damper on so many of these like committees and processes and do you see that changing and hopefully coming back to some sense of normalcy in the next year or two?
Well, it's interesting, and surprisingly, a number of the committees are thriving and doing better during COVID because of the ease of getting together on Zoom. People don't have to travel, they can fit it, and so many more people, privileged people, like unfortunately many of our members are able to work from home now and participate more than they ever could.
Interesting.
That's on the downside. The first day school has been, lumped. They haven't been able to get together with the children other than on Halloween and Christmas. So that's been a real loss. And for all of us not having contact with the children and meeting. The other thing that is obviously, I think, the most detrimental so far is the fact that until very recently, we haven't been able to get together and worship together. Worshiping together is very different than worshiping remotely. And so far, we've had very few people, 4 people, 6 people, willing and able to come into the meeting house and worship together. So hopefully, all we can hope is, I think what I see, 150 million Americans have had at least one shot, or roughly that number. That's half. We're getting closer, and the numbers per day, I don't know if you follow any of this, but where we were vaccinating 3 million people a day, it's well below 2 million now. So fewer and fewer mass numbers of people are showing up. So I don't know whether that means that, well, I do know that they say 80% of people over 65 have been vaccinated completely. So that's a pretty good number. But down in the other parts of the population, I guess, especially among younger people and in rural areas, it's much less. But with any luck, I'm hoping, by the fall, we might all feel comfortable, again, getting together, sharing snacks and having the children around. I'm hoping. Who knows? Mary, I think you're on mute. No,
Yep.
you're not. No, here you go. I hear you.
The library committee is one of the ones that really hasn't been able to do it remotely. We'd had volunteers almost every week working on labeling and checking our cataloging of books. That, of course, came to a quick stop. So we've been stopped for a year.
And certainly community life has been pretty much stopped for a year.
Right.
Although they did manage to pull something together for both Halloween and Christmas. So it's been, I guess, in summary, Daniel, there's certainly been major effects, but many of the committees, such as Peace and Social Concerns and Care and Council and Worship and Ministry, are chugging along.
Zoom is a lot better than nothing.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say that the pandemic has been emotionally draining for the members of the Circle of Light.
Oh, yeah.
And we would welcome the infusion of new people. Most of the committee has been there for years now.
Yeah. Well, that again, nominating has really a challenge right now because we have many committees that need replacements and additions. And
well, our numbers are not renewed by nominating.
no, that's right. Yours are volunteers, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, but we have. There's lots of opportunity for the fresh faces who have chosen to participate here. We've taken your names.
I guess just, this is a question, I promise there, Steve. So I guess what would, if you were sort of newer to these processes, what do you think would be a good way to learn more about how to do this, how to do business meeting, how to clerk, how to just practice Quaker business in the right, proper way?
Good question. Go ahead, Glenna.
I think it would be good if people would submit their items to the clerk way earlier. Then the clerk could get the agenda out to the group.
Absolutely. Wouldn't that be nice?
And if people know what's on the agenda, they're more apt to come. But no, it's just, it's hard to just get it in time for the meeting.
Yep. No matter how many times we plead, please get your agenda items into us.
Yes. And yeah, and it's better if it's in writing and not a phone call.
Oh, absolutely.
That way, the recording clerk doesn't have to try to figure out to take notes for everything the person says, and then do the minute. It's really hard.
Okay, so for somebody like me who's been that's not a member, who's been kind of showing up on Sunday mornings, what is I'm sure there's not what's the next step or process of like, say I wanted to become a member and start going to business meetings and doing some of these other things?
First of all, you can go to business meeting without being a member.
Absolutely. Everybody is invited to business meeting.
But secondly, if and when you're ready, you write a letter and you give it to Caring Council saying you would like to become a member of the Friends Meeting of Austin.
Right.
And then you get one of these clearance committees.
I pointed you to that. I sent you an email, I believe, Daniel, about the place on the website that gives you on our website, about us, how to become a member, gives you detailed instructions.
Okay.
But I think the question, where do I find out how to be a Quaker in general? You know, what is all this stuff you're talking about? Let me know when you find that answer.
Act like a Quaker.
Pardon?
Oh, you just act like a Quaker. And
There
then
you go.
apply for membership. We say, oh, you're not a member? We thought you were a member. A lot of us did it that way. Some of us waited some years before we applied, but you just start participating, and people will clue you in on how things work as it goes, and you can always ask questions.
I'm sure
Daniel,
someone mentioned. Sorry.
in the last or the first business meeting that I ever attended, that it was really interesting. But also I learned that you don't have to be a member to be on committees, which I thought that was, I didn't think that would have been the case, and it was. So if you're wanting to join something, I wouldn't let not being a member stop you, because how can you know whether or not you want to be a member without being more involved? And you can't be involved, or as involved you really want to be without being on committees, which I think is a really great way to think about it. But it's just not usually what's standard in most other organizations.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing that up.
Very true. I guess, I don't know if we mentioned, I think it might still be the case. The only exceptions to that would be Caring Council and Worship and Ministry, which I think just because of the confidentiality, they want to make sure that people are people we know and really, really trust and are members of the meeting there.
But another source, of course, and then this is also on the website, is reading Faith and Practice. If there's any such thing as a manual for Quakers, it's Faith and Practice. Now, it includes a lot of things that are writings by Quakers expressing their faith in maybe language of 300 years ago, but it also has a whole lot of details about how we're organized and how we do things, and et cetera. And that we have that online on the website also. The website has a lot of stuff. If you're new and you haven't spent time on it, you should.
I also might make a plug for Beyond Majority Rule by really great book. It's actually by Michael Sheeran. He's a Jesuit priest.
A priest.
And I guess it was part of the Jesuit project to look into consensus. Well, we wouldn't call it consensus. Unity seeking. He calls it consensus. It's different words. Many subtleties there. that was actually practiced by the Jesuits, I think, very early in their history, that similar mode of decision making. And he was sort of, in an effort to look back at that, he was sort of looked at the Quakers. And I think it's a really interesting, because he's not a Quaker, and he's just very open and very interested and very thoughtful. But he also sort of sees it a little bit from the outside, what's happening in the Quaker business meeting process, which I think is a really valuable perspective on it.
Absolutely.
James, what was the name of the book again, please?
Sure, it's Beyond Majority Rule by Michael Sheeran. I'll write the name in the chat as well.
We have copies in the library, obviously. Unless James and I have the only 2 copies out. I should return mine, I suppose.
Oh, no, I think you might be right about that, Steve. I thought this was mine, but it has a Margaret Hoffman's name in the front, so I should probably return it to Friends Meeting of Boston. Thank you for.
Does it have a colored label on the back?
Oh, maybe I bought it off the book table. It does not have a colored label, so I'm uncertain. However, I'm happy to loan it to anyone, whether or not this is library property, if you're interested.
It's good. It is an excellent book. Well, I'm tired.
This is completely unrelated, but as we wind down, I forgot about a really big joy that I got this week, and I just wanted to tell you guys. So over a year ago, I signed up for Big Brothers Big Sisters and went through the training, and unfortunately, they have a lot more young boys and just boys in general that need big brothers rather than, and they have a lot of female volunteers and not as many like little sisters. So supply and demand, and they don't usually match up little sisters with big brothers or the reverse. They don't really do that. So I've been waiting over a year for a little sister, and I just got a call last week that I got matched. And I don't know if at first they call me to see if I'm still interested and all of that, and then if I say yes, then they call the child and their parent and make sure that that I'm appropriate or that they that they're interested, and then we'll move forward. But it's really exciting because I've been waiting over a year, and she lives really close to me, and it's really exciting. I'm really excited about it.
Wonderful. Keep us posted.
Yeah, I hope your class is great this evening too, Shalisa. That's so cool. Yeah.
I'm excited about it. I mean, I know I bring it up like it's like the only thing I ever have to say at any like meeting that I go to, but it's like it's the only anchor I have for the month of April. That's the only thing I've going on in the month of April is this class. I've been waiting.
I think I'm going to try to go to that. So, yeah.
Great.
And Larry, I just bought your book on Amazon, so I'll have to check it out. Thanks for mentioning it.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I hope you like science fiction.
I do.
Thank you so much, Steve and Mary, for sharing your wisdom on this topic and your deep knowledge of these issues.
Together very well. If it beats the 25-year-old model we have otherwise.
Thanks, Steve.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.